Welcome to the Ears to Hear podcast. We are on episode 42. 42. That's crazy we've been doing it that long.
Yep. Coming up on a year.
I know, isn't that? Wow, that's crazy.
Next month, a whole year.
That is insane.
Yep. And it's not too long after that Kimball joined. It was like maybe October, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you when.
I'll have to go look. I like to look up that stuff. It's fun for me
to
know.
It's interesting. Just as a way of reminder, if you guys have a small and simple things to send in, please do. We've had a lot of good response from those, and there's a lot of people still that have told me that they're going to do it without me even prodding or twisting any arms or anything like that. So,
yeah, and I've gotten a lot too.
As well.
Yeah, topic requests.
That's what we're doing today. Another topic request.
Yeah, that helps a lot. Like, there's a lot of stuff for us to possibly talk about. So when someone gives us an idea, that's really helpful. So keep that up.
Absolutely. Again, our email is earstohearpodcast@gmail.com. I will forever have to look to Curtis.
It's okay.
To get that right.
We all have our talents. That's just not one of yours.
It's not one of mine. You just don't have that one.
That's fine. That's why there's three of us.
So today,
I get it though. Now that I help Alan put all the stuff up, I see why. Because each place kind of had their own little signifying.
Some
ears
places,
to hear in there.
Yeah, some places had ears to hear podcast available. Some I couldn't use that. I had to use ears to hear podcast or ears to hear LDS or a variation.
Yep.
And it has forever screwed me up.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, but today's topic, like Kimball was saying, was a suggestion. And when Kimball brought it up, we all were like, "Yes, that's a fun one. Let's tackle that one."
Yep.
So without further ado, I'm going to toss it over to Kimball. Yep. He's gonna get us primed, locked, cocked, and ready to rock.
That's right. Yeah.
So the request was speaking to atheism, speaking to all things. I think the request had something to do with what do I say to my atheist friend? That kind of an idea.
Yeah, to the whole "is there a God?" question.
Yeah, right? From their frame of reference, from their perspective, understanding atheism. And so I went into deep dives of looking at debates, looking at all kinds of YouTube videos from atheists debating Christians, from atheists discussing it with other atheists and having debates that way, from got into even just Christians debating other Christians and some of these outpouring things from it. There's one thing that I think we address initially is that in the debate setting, obviously we don't have an atheist here with us.
Yeah.
Unless, you guys are closet atheists.
Closet. We masquerade.
I'm infiltrating.
The ultimate sheep in wolf's clothing. Yeah.
The idea of discussing with an atheist, when you watch these debates, there is nothing but contempt sometimes between the two debaters.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're polite. Sometimes it's not that bad, but occasionally some of these debates are like, you're an idiot because you think this, and I'm perfect because I think that.
Yeah.
And it goes back and forth both directions.
Yep.
And I just want to say, no person, atheist, Christian, no matter the faith tradition, no person is persuadable if you do not have love for them and they can't recognize that love.
You have to have an open heart, You can be in your glass tower throwing rocks all day long, right?
Yeah.
And again, there's in a lot of cases, there's not a need to debate the person on their belief.
Yeah.
So, we're talking atheism today, which I think is super critical, but even if you're talking to someone in a different faith, Christian, faction, or any of the other major religions and their factions.
Scientology.
Sure.
Oh, now you just stretched it, Alan. I was doing good. I was feeling the spirit. Those people aren't going to get let into heaven, right?
But that idea of, the first thing that anyone has to do is establish a relationship of love and trust.
Yeah.
And then, debate, not necessary. When the person is open and willing and curious, they'll come to you, they'll ask questions, or opportunities will present themselves, and pray the Spirit will guide you in your discussion of it.
Yeah.
That being said,
Well, and to go along with it, I think oftentimes the debate air that gets in conversations is that people are so scared of thinking like the other person.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it should be, if we're asking other people to take a chance on our beliefs on God and Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ, we should have enough confidence in our own faith to be like, okay, I will listen to your argument with a full open ear, and be willing to discuss it, not talk down to them, get on the same playing field as they do. I think President Nelson and the Quorum of 12, I feel like we see that constantly. They meet people in their religions on the same level, and they have respect for them all the time.
Mm-hmm.
They get, we find common ground between each of us, wherever we could find that. And so it's okay. You don't have to feel threatened and have to fight for God, right?
Well, and I think that goes back to our podcast where we talked about, disagree without being disagreeable.
Yes. Yeah.
Because it's like any debate that I listen to now, whether it's between science and whatever, or two different sciences, what I mean, scientists that disagree on something, or whether that's a creationist scientist with a
Big Bang,
with a Big Bang scientist, or whether we're going to the God debate, it's hard to watch something without it dripping with agenda.
Oh yeah,
you know.
And that being said, I did notice one thing that I don't even think that all of these people doing the debates realize. Every one of them, and this I believe is universal for all mankind, all of us care about one thing. All of us have the same opinion about one thing. It's that truth matters.
Yeah.
It's the core of why everyone debates. Because they think it matters, and that it's bad when someone gets it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's the one universal agreement. Even if the tyranny that oppresses, they know that truth matters, and they lie because of it.
Yeah.
Because if truth was known to the people, they would have the power to rise up and rebel, and they would win.
Yeah.
So even the tyranny knows truth is supreme.
What if it's my truth?
that's where we get to the
I'm giving you
points.
an alley-oop here.
Truth is simultaneously the most bright, enlightening, empowering, magnificent thing to comprehend when you learn it and conform to it.
Yeah.
And the most heartless, cold, unforgiving, oppressive thing when you fight against it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like when Christ talked about being a stumbling block of offense, right? I think that's what we're talking about.
Well, I love how Ben Shapiro always says, facts don't care about your feelings.
They really don't.
You know what I mean? That's immediately what I thought of when you just read that.
So I picture truth being this massive ocean that is battering against the rocks. And if you fight against it, if you place yourself in between it and the rocks and the ocean, and you rail and fight, you have literally no impact on it.
Mm-hmm.
It cares nothing for you, and it will utterly destroy you. It matters that you realize what truth is in time before it shreds you into nothing.
Yeah.
If you can stop yourself from fighting, you can realize that truth isn't just the ocean. It's both the oceans, the rocks, the sky, it's everything. And when you embrace it and submit yourself to it, you realize that you are truth too. You truly have all power as you are the ocean moving and the wind blowing and the immovable rock. Only when you know truth can you have the power to influence what is true. Not by fighting it, but by conforming to it and guiding its path.
Some good stuff there.
Yeah.
I like that. And I think that isn't being understood at all right now, right?
Yeah.
And going back to some of our previous stuff, right? Like, that's why controlling the narrative, that's why controlling what is true and what is not true is so vital for the success of an opposing force, right?
Exactly.
Because, I guess we never shy away from the hard topics
No,
here.
we
But
don't.
when you look at someone who wants to be a woman and they are biologically a man, I totally line up with Glenn Beck on this. Surprise, surprise. But we're all a bunch of conservatives here. But it's one of those things. It's like, look, if you want me to call you a woman, that's fine. I'll respect that. I'll call you a she, whatever. You know what I mean? But if we go to the hospital, I'm going to tell you that you're biologically a male.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not going to play
There's
into the fantasy anymore.
There's a whole bunch of errors in the assumption. The man who says, well, I feel like a woman. Well, how do you know you're feeling like a woman when you've been a man your whole life? Why would you assume those are woman feelings?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's so much error in the thought. There's justification of the error in the thought that comes from outside of the person as well. That, again, truth being something that is stationary in its, this is true, this is not true. You decide to choose the thing that's not true. That doesn't change it.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't change the fact you're a man,
right?
If you believe you're a woman,
right?
Much like atheism. Atheism,
Yep.
to me, as much as I watched all these debates, atheism manifests exactly like a religion.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And most atheists would probably get super offended if you said that, which that's fine. But if you think about it, true atheism, which I would say in the intelligent debates, no one admits to being a true atheist. True atheism states that I know that there isn't a God.
Yeah. That's a good point to make,
but
right
you
there.
are, by saying I know, claiming omniscience.
Mm-hmm.
I know all things, therefore I know that there isn't a God.
Yeah.
So therefore you are the God. So there is a God. It's a defeating in terms.
It's a catch-22.
Right? Gods are omniscient. And if you're saying there isn't a God, you must be omniscient, therefore you're a God.
Yeah.
So the smartest, Dawkins, he's like, I'm on a scale of 1 to 7, I'm a 6 point, well, he says 9, I say 6.66.
There you go. I like that.
Percent agnostic. I can't prove that there isn't a God, but I'm so thoroughly convinced there isn't one that on and on.
Yeah.
But it's very much, again, the attempt to convert that person away from it. You have to find commonalities in what do you believe that is true. And again, these debates as they go back and forth, it's so frustrating because the atheist attacks the religious man, and it does so by attacking all of religion. And the religious man will make his claims, his arguments, etc., try to defend his own faith, but he can't defend all of religion.
Yeah.
Because there is such a shattering of all religion. I mean, it is a giant mirror shattered into a billion pieces. The factions of faith and traditions and beliefs and systems of origin of that belief. Atheists, they don't have that structure. Like in Christendom, there's thousands of different denominations. So how could you possibly hope to defend any of them when you know very little about most of them?
Yeah.
Atheism doesn't have that kind of structure. There's not a order of it. There's not, there are guys who are kind of put as the intellectual thinkers of atheism, whether it's Dawkins or Stephen Fry or the four horsemen of the atheism.
Right.
Those guys are propped up as these massive intellectual thinkers, and they're incredibly intelligent men.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no structure, so what do you attack back, right? And again, attack is a hard word.
Yeah.
But what do you use to expose their flaws in logic and that kind of thing when they are forcing you on defense all the time? And that's one of the most frustrating things about watching these debates, was watching Christians having to defend every religion ever.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, of course, we as members of the church have an entirely different stance here, where we view 99% of the world's religions and religious as corrupt, fallen, don't have it right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so why would I need to defend them?
Yeah.
They don't have truth. Again, they defend religion, and the debates tend to be between religion or not religion, when in reality, if the religion is in alliance with a lie, then it's just as bad as if you're an atheist and there is God, then you're in alliance with a lie.
Right.
Yeah.
So understanding that the goal to any of this should be the ultimate truth, not defending of religiosity in general. I think is a big flaw of where a lot of these debates go off.
Well, and I feel like that is, I think that there was a time when that was the case, where it was like, look, no matter what God you believe in or whatever, no matter, and if you don't believe in God, that's fine as well, right? Because there was people even hundreds of years ago. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
But there was
Whatever you not believe in is good.
exactly,
It's
yeah.
going to make you
It's
better.
it's all good, right?
No.
But there was at least a common theme of, it's like, look, if you look at the evidence and it suggests this, then you can't deny that.
Mm-hmm.
Today we have the opposite, where they're like, hey, let's throw out the evidence and let's come up with a reason why that's happening, right? That's a big thing that's happening now, and it frustrates the heck out of me,
Yeah.
Especially like with that mitochondrial DNA stuff, where it's like, hey, if we go back, because this mitochondrial DNA doesn't mutate at a rate the same as which everything else does, right? It's much slower. And when you trace it back, it goes back 6,000 years ago to a mitochondrial Eve.
The Human Genome Project.
Yep, that freaked people out, and it they they couldn't deal with it, so they threw it out.
They threw it out, but when you bring that argument up, the atheist says, well, that doesn't prove that it was the Adam and Eve of biblical stories. It just means that there was a common ancestor for all of humankind.
Mm-hmm.
They might have had another, evolutionary blah, 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 blah.
Oh, and fair enough. You know what I mean?
It's like, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's all the data points to.
Then we can at least agree with that for our species, if you want to put it that way, that we came back to a common ancestor at 6,000 years ago, right? Yeah. And it just so happens that the Bible got that right. The book of myths got it right? Yeah.
Exactly. And like you say, most people, scientists, atheists, don't acknowledge that as science.
Right.
Because it's inconvenient.
Because it goes against the agenda, right? Because I have a theory here. It's a theory. I don't know that it's a fact. But because I've watched a lot of these debates, I've watched the Bill Nye and Ken Ham debate. I've watched the Hitchens and Dinesh D'Souza debates. And they're very interesting to watch. They're very entertaining.
There's good information to get there.
I find
solid.
myself arguing with both of them.
I know, right? Yeah, it's true.
That's the problem.
It's true. But, it's cool because when you watch these, they're, most of the time the Christian is on the defensive in these and stuff like that. But every once in a while, like, you'll get Ken Ham, and he's a pit bull. You know what I mean? And he does so in a respectful manner, where he's like, look, the burden of proof isn't on me here. You know what I mean? It's on you just as much as it is on me, right?
Yeah.
We both have our worldview, and we're looking at the exact same evidence, and because of our worldview, we're interpreting it differently, right?
Yeah.
Bill Nye did not like that.
No.
Right? Because
he was a jerk.
He was a huge jerk about it. It's like, look, if you don't agree, that's fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But for him to be respected amongst his community, he has to do that.
Yeah, that's true.
I am convinced that there are, not all, totally not all, but I think that there is a small percentage of these guys who know the truth, who are atheists but know the truth.
Book of Mormon Antichrist kind of.
Yes, Korihor.
Yeah.
Korihor, right?
Yep.
Where
come up.
yeah, exactly, because it fits it perfectly, right?
Yeah.
And like, especially Stephen Dawkins and stuff like this, like these guys. There is like the way that the venom and the vitriol at which they come against people who believe in God is weird. It's like, what happened to you?
Yeah, and this is where I was thinking about, the atheists that I've interacted with.
Yeah.
And most of atheists, they start from a place of religion and move to atheism. And it's usually through some sort of reasoning where they feel, because of usually horrible things that happen in the world,
right,
that they lose faith in something that can be good, right? And then they devolve to the fact that we just must all be animals living out, our instincts down here.
Right.
And to some degree, I feel for that. I mean, I understand, like, unless you have a certain amount of truth, right? It looks like, how could there be a God in the midst of all this hurt and evil and pain, right? If you don't have the understanding of the balance, right? Mm-hmm. And honestly, you get some of that from the Bible, But honestly, you get more of that from the Book of Mormon than anything. The Bible does a decent amount, but you don't really understand the need for pain in the process of development until you get further down the line, right?
But we do believe in a absence of all religious truth in the Great Apostasy.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
You know, we do believe that right along with the atheist, all religion turned bad.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. The waters were pretty muddy,
Yeah.
you know, and there was some horrible things done in the name of God that no wonder people lost amounts of religion.
Yeah.
Right.
A lot of the second guessing that Christians find horrible from atheists are really credible doubts.
Yeah.
They are second guessing. They're asking for proofs, and their motives in a large amount of the cases are actually sincere. Like, hey, look at all these religions who claim religiosity and do horrible things. How could religion possibly be good if... lay out your case.
Right.
And honestly, that's a really good point. Most religions have been corrupted in that sense. They've become very evil in a lot of their practices, whether it's human sacrifice, whether it's... But again, even with those religions, it's all about motives and understanding motives. Mm-hmm. At the same time, when the atheist attempts to expose those things, they often make a call for the abandoning of all religion, all ceremony, all worship of a god.
Throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Magic.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Ezra Booth, right?
Yeah. Think about how dead of a world we would live in. That's why I really actually enjoy Stephen Fry, is because he, as much as he's an atheist, loves drama. He loves the portrayal of acting and myth and loves that it lives within us. And what good is gained by killing Christianity's version of Christmas? Mm-hmm. You just have another work week. So what's the good in that?
Yeah. When
instead you could have this tradition and joy and spending time with family. So the end goal, the true end goal of atheism is North Korea.
Yeah.
And even then, they're not truly atheistic. They worship their leaders.
Yeah, they deify their leaders.
Yeah, they deify their leaders.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the end goal of atheism really is a collapse of all faith systems, not simply faith systems in religion. Mm-hmm. Because, and we know this at least, not of every atheist, but of the atheistic movements in our day, they have very commonly morphed into, like you were saying, this adoption of non-truths and provable non-truths, like the transgenderism movements,
right?
Like we're so obsessed with life as one of the evidences of the atheist-Christian debate or religious debate, and yet these atheists will so commonly support all abortion, 100% of all abortion. And then, of course, in history, you have provable atheists performing mass genocides. Hundreds of millions of people have died because of atheism. Mm-hmm. Because the value of human life is decreased into literally nothing but might as well be a tapeworm. Yet at the same time, if we were to find life on Mars, you'd have this dramatic celebration of the proof of science. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of contradictions that atheists don't recognize in their own doctrines,
right?
And they are doctrines.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're not performing the scientific experiment yourself. You're relying on someone else's experiment and testimony of that scientific experiment. It's very much still faith, if you understand that faith is literally every belief of everything that you do not experience 100% independent.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, and I think it's really easy for us to get this vitriol, right, from the atheists. But I think it's important to note that I've actually interacted with people who are atheists who really are good people.
Oh,
they believe in being good people for no other reason than they should. They recognize that that's the way society should function. And in some ways, it's interesting, they found their way back around to virtue by subverting all religion, right? Like, I don't need God to tell me to be a good person. I am a good person, which is something a true Christian would be like, they would agree with, right? But the fact is, because it's like we were talking about, people leave religion, it's almost like they have this compensatory amount of energy that they have to expend in the opposite direction. And that's why what we see most of the time is that people who are inflamed and they need to burn down all religion. But honestly, the most people who that I've interacted with that would call themselves atheists really just are striving to be a good person. They have no concept of something outside of the earth that's getting them to do so.
Sure.
It's all inborn, which just a little bit of a tweak, and you're right back on the same path.
And it is a tweak. It's a subtle corruption of any given thing.
Exactly.
And if you believe that falsehood, again, every human being has this universal I value truth. Whether I value truth enough to hide it from someone, or I value truth and want to share it with someone, everyone values and recognizes the imperative quality of truth.
Mm-hmm.
And if you misunderstand what truth is, it can create these dogmas that are antagonistic.
Yeah.
Well, see, that it's interesting to me that we that we as human beings, ever since we can go back and record history and read and stuff like that, going back to what our ancestors thousands of years ago thought, right? There has always been a teaching of good and evil.
Yep.
Right? Regardless of what religion it is,
Yep. And quite honestly, God in some form.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's always a God, there's always a good and evil. And it's like, why in evolution would that be there? What evolutionary advantage does that give us?
Yep.
It almost seems like a disadvantage, because look at all the things that you sacrifice to these idols. Look at all these, like wheat, you know what I mean? All these things that were hard to come by back in the day, right?
Yeah. But from a pure survivalistic stance, living with a God makes no sense.
Exactly.
Evolutionary, right?
Exactly.
And that's actually, I heard this a long time ago, but that's one of the proofs, right? It's weird, but one of the proofs that there must be a God is the fact that we have any belief of a God in our system. Because if we were literally brought up through amoeba, we would have had no reason to look to the outside for any sort of deliverance. Yeah, right?
Exactly.
There wouldn't be that. Some people would say you're trying to, they try to explain natural disasters and whatnot, but still, that's a far cry to make that jump. It wouldn't make any sense for them to come to that. Now, if you go the route of God being there, instituting it from the beginning, and then it gets filtered out, through ages of passing down oral history, that accounts for it. That explains why we have a tradition of worshiping a god or gods.
Well, and see, like the only other plausible thing that it could be is, and it's funny because these guys are looked at as wackos in the scientific community, but they will go to their explanation over religion any day of the week. And I've seen Richard Dawkins do it, right? Where the Ancient Aliens dudes, right?
Yeah, the Ancient
I love
Aliens.
watching those. Those are very interesting because it's the exact same thing. That it's their worldview, right?
Yeah.
And we're saying the same thing. We're looking at the same evidence.
We're just defining it differently.
We're defining it differently, but it's the same thing, right? It's like we basically are aliens here.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, our spirits were not created here.
Yeah, we're just visiting.
Exactly. Yeah.
The Earth will then ascend back to where we were, but right now, this is not where we began.
Yes, this is not where we began and stuff. And
a lot of it too is the flaw that, and I've seen it again in so many of these debates, where the initial assertion of evolution is just, okay, yeah, we believe DNA is everything for the making of a thing, and so let's move from that point on. And that's not. And that's the point where the Christian loses, is conceding that DNA is the creation of all things. So the electric universe theory, one of their most recent videos, they prove that under a different amount of electrical focus and stress, you can totally distort the way a creature grows. Oh, you didn't change their DNA? So obviously you have DNA, but DNA is essentially the ingredients. It's maybe at most the recipe, but they don't understand how DNA puts things in a certain pattern. Like how if you have all the ingredients in a recipe in front of you, is the head always on top? Is the feet always two? Is the arms always two? Is the eyes in a certain shape? So there's this lab that's been doing these studies for a decade or more, where they subject these different areas of a creature to just a hint of a different electrical stress.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get a tadpole with a fully formed eye on its tail.
Interesting.
And it's a 3-eyed tadpole.
Huh.
They did it with tapeworms. And as you know, with tapeworms, you can chop off and they regrow.
Yeah.
So they put this tapeworm under a different kind of electrical stress, chopped it, and the back grew a second head instead of a tail. And when it reproduced, it created 2-headed, no-tailed tapeworms. They created a separate species with the exact same DNA.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of goes back to the whole nature versus nurture a
Yes.
little bit. You know, the nature of us is the DNA, you know, and what we believe, the spiritual aspect of it, but the nurture, you know, whatever you experience along the way can have, you know, dramatic effects upon you. Yeah.
But DNA, if it was the only influencer, and only through DNA you got changes, then these electrical experiments would have failed. So just right there you have the first, perhaps, in a line of evidences that could come if scientists would allow themselves this opposition. Bill Nye, in arguing with Ken Ham, kept saying, hey, you show me anything to prove me wrong and I'll gladly accept it.
Mm-hmm.
And yet scientists don't do that.
No.
It's provably true that
That's lip service.
They like with the Human Genome Project, they openly reject anything that opposes the current standard model, especially with the structure of the universe, especially with the nature of DNA. These scientific issues that there are credible scientists contesting, they're all treated as, you must be insane to want to compete with this proven science that 97% of scientists believe. Well, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if 110% of scientists believe, if they believe a lie.
Yeah, I hate peer review so bad for that exact reason. Because it's like, okay, if we were doing that, then Aristotle was a moron. You know what I mean? All of these guys going back into those, it was the same thing. It was like, look, we all know that that's wrong. The Earth is not revolving around the sun, and because you said that,
Model
exactly, exactly, and they knew that to be true at that time.
Model. That's one of the things that people.
No, it was not. It was not. The Egyptians, the Greeks, they all had equations for figuring out that the Earth was round.
Yeah.
That's a misnomer.
But they did believe the Earth was. Everything rotated around it.
Yes.
For good reason, because of the electric universe theory's original solar system that we were disrupted from.
Right.
That's why the heliocentric model had to be changed.
Yeah.
So you can't truly comprehend the nature of this argument that the Earth is this long, it's lived this long, it's always been this way, if you don't consider that there's a gigantic amount of human history and testimony that contradicts you.
Right.
Yeah.
The scientists don't consider that because of uniformitarianism.
Well, and they pick and choose everything as well. Like we provably can go into the Arctic ice and drill those huge bores of these huge cylinders of ice and go back thousands of years and see that the atmosphere was different. Provably, right? They're like, the makeup of the atmosphere was different. However, we're not going to treat anything with that information. We're going to say, no, carbon decays at the same rate now that it did back then, even though there's a slew of things that could have affected that, right?
Yeah.
And it's frustrating again.
Well, again, with evolution, or I should say the dating kind of mindset, you have laid down in quote unquote, a billion-year-old rock. And then in the middle of layer after layer of this testable billion-year-old rock, you have a 45-million-year-old tree. Not on top of the layers, but inside all the other layers.
Standing up. Yeah.
So there's provable evidence that would call question to their dating methods.
Yeah.
So they're just cast aside as anomalies.
Yeah.
That's part of the problem is like, the idea that one of the biggest things they go to is this 4.5 billion year old Earth model. The universe is this many billion of a year old as well. And anytime that's contested, well, I should say this, anytime it's conceded, especially by a Christian, you've lost every argument past that point. When you go back to those evidences and scientific proofs, the redshift theory is blown out of the water by probably a dozen different evidences. One is the quote-unquote older models of solar systems that have planets and things have the wrong kind of redshift, and the younger solar systems have the wrong kind of redshift for the way they project how planets form. They project that planets form around old solar systems and dust is around these new solar systems, and the dust swirls into planets.
Right.
Yeah.
But why then would the solar systems with planets have a higher redshift than the solar systems, or date younger than the solar systems with all the dust? So there's one evidence. There's several evidences of these high redshift quasars, these objects in space that look like they are hundreds of billions of light years away. And then when they do all these extra levels of spectrometers, understanding whole different ranges of light, they see that, wait, that object is connected with this magnetism to an object next to it in the sky. But if the redshift is correct, they'd be hundreds of billions of light years apart. How could they be connected?
Mm-hmm.
And the proof there is there's a bunch of those all throughout space. Why, if redshift theory is correct, why would all of those objects be pointed at us like a laser?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we see any of them shooting across all of sky as these two objects are connected by hundreds of billions of years of magnetism? Now, it's provable then, because of that, to extrapolate that their redshift model is wrong. That not everything is based on expansion, but often it's based on the energy release of the thing or its age. And then if you take that and you correct for those things, you get not an expanding universe, but an eternally long universe.
Mm-hmm.
Another one of these evidences is
that sounds too godlike.
Use the word eternal.
Eternal.
Another one of these evidences is that because of this redshift theory, they're like, okay, this object here, that entire network of galaxies must be moving at a rate of 1 billion times the speed of light. And it's like, how could an entire galaxy move faster than the speed of light?
Right.
So they have an age for the universe. If there was a Big Bang, it all dates back to this certain point based on redshift.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then they have this wealth of celestial bodies that are moving faster than that.
Mm-hmm.
If the redshift model they have is correct.
Yeah.
These bodies that have moved at such a dramatic rate because of their redshift that they must be so far beyond this expansion theory. Again, I forget the term for it, but it's this like hyperspeed kind of idea. Again, totally not possible.
Yeah, they got to twist themselves into pretzels to make it work,
Yeah.
basically.
And it's the same reason why they have all these errors in their models. But Bill Nye saying, hey, you show me another science, you show me some other evidence, and I'll totally believe it. No, it's a lie. They don't conform, at least in general, this atheist militant community, they don't conform to the new science,
right?
To allow for a second proof.
No,
I mean, peer review when it first was established was meant to be a good thing. It was meant to get information that someone found out into a bunch of different people's hands,
right?
And to have the whole community review it as a whole and try to assess it and learn from it, right? But unfortunately, as we've progressed, it's just become a way for everyone to gang up on somebody, to have a confirmation bias with a bunch of other people and not consider new data.
To shun.
Which is why that one group faked all those research papers, and just because it included language like Mein Kampf, it got published.
That's retarded.
You gotta play their game.
Yeah.
It's like going to school.
Well, it's interesting because like we're talking about the universe, we've talked about DNA a little bit and stuff like that.
Big to little.
And there's so many there's so many people who will look at both the universe and DNA and be like, it's the same thing. Like these are ordered
Yeah,
and
I'm so glad you
extremely
went here.
yeah.
Because I wanted to get here.
They're ordered in extremely similar fashions,
Yeah.
right? Like DNA is basically like a mini universe. Our cells are like a mini
Yeah.
universe inside of us.
Yeah, you go down to the smallest unit we have, and it correlates and matches up with
Yes.
how we see the universe.
Yes.
And I mean, I don't know how you get there, right, without having some sort of belief in some sort of order, right? And the only way you can believe in order is with God.
So
Okay, cool.
let me
Hear me. Show me.
let me read some definitions here. So let's the definition for program. A set of related measures or activities with a particular long-term aim, a series of coded software instructions to control the operation of a computer or other machine. So that's program, right? Information, what is conveyed or represented by a particular arrangement or sequence of things, and then quotation marks, genetically transmitted information. Instruction, a direction or order, detailed information telling how something should be done, operated, or assembled.
Okay.
So let's look at a computer program. All right, we all like to game every once in a while.
We know computer programs. Even those that like to index, they know what computer programs are.
Or family history programs, right? Yeah. Okay, a computer programs are a series of binary numbers. We've all heard binary, right? That's a language.
Ones and zeros, open or closed.
Yes, exactly. These numbers tell the computer what to do. Without them being formed intelligently, you have nothing, no games, no apps, right? No Facebook, right? And nothing. So I listened to this guy from India talk about this, and it was fascinating because he was a scientist. He was very intelligent, and he understood all the workings of a computer program. And he said they're very complex, right? And if you get something wrong, you get a bug, right? Now, how do you fix a bug in a computer program?
You have to go code by code, line by line,
Yes.
and you weed out the problem.
Somebody has to go fix it, right? It takes an intelligence to go fix a bug in a program.
Exactly.
So then he compares that. He says, okay, let's talk about DNA, right? A lot of people will be like, oh yeah, like especially the scientists, they don't want to go into it too much, and they'll be very careful about the terms that they use when they're speaking about the DNA.
Yeah, in the debate setting, you can't risk going into certain territories.
Yes, exactly. And which is why they'll pivot away from a lot of these things.
Interesting.
Okay, so the functions of a cell inside the body are controlled by an incredibly complex and detailed code. Okay, written in the DNA, which resides in the nucleus of the cells of our body. It's in every cell in our body, right?
Go back to biology class. Yep.
This code acts like a computer script. The letters of the code are A, T, G, and C.
Yep, A, T, G, and C.
Right. So a binary uses zeros and ones.
Yeah.
So our DNA uses 4 things, right, instead of 2 things.
It's complex by the power of 2.
Yes.
Over just what we do for computers.
It's totally way more complex. So, and the ATGC stands for adenine, thymine,
molecules.
Guanine. I'm not going to embarrass myself here by trying to
different molecules on the elemental table.
Different molecules, right? And so when you mess with these things, right, you get different results. So just like our computer binary code is ones and zeros, entire functions of the body are decided by the genetic code written in the nucleus of our cells. DNA code is 3 billion letters long, and its instructions are written by different sequences of these letters and arrangements of those 4 letters, which are actually chemicals. So DNA also has instructions written into it to repair itself.
Yeah.
So our computer code, if it has a bug, it can't repair itself, right? No. There is a script inside of our DNA, and they can observe it. They've observed it under a microscope, where it will go through, and as the DNA is forming, they'll have mistakes in the DNA. This little script is what I call it. Yeah. Right, intelligently will go through, it will analyze the DNA and start repairing it.
Yeah.
going up the helix, right?
I remember learning about that in biology class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's funny because I listened to this guy. He's like, there is no way. No, he goes, it's funny that we can believe, these atheists, they would be better off believing, or it's equivalent for them to believe that these computer programs built themselves, right? Out of chaos. It's the same thing.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
Except for it's more believable for the computer program, because it's less complex.
Yeah, it is.
Than what our DNA is.
Yeah.
Right?
To imagine that kind of complexity forming out of nothing is literally impossible. And I say that because, you can believe it, but the most intellectual of the atheists will reach a point upon the challenging of this idea that eventually it had to have come from somewhere, some other intelligence.
Yeah.
So even
too much
Dawkins,
It was aliens.
Dawkins in Ben Stein's documentary was brought to admit
That's where I saw it from as well.
That origin must have been aliens, because you can't have, I can understand where Darwin came from, because at his time, with his level of technology, he watched bubbles that were cells.
Right.
And if life came from bubbles, well, there's lots of places where bubbles occur naturally. Therefore, it could have come from some primordial bubble.
Right. In the ocean or something.
Yeah.
And maybe there's stuff going on inside the bubble, but you don't really understand what it is.
Yeah.
You escalate 1 billion times more technology from Darwin to now, and that's where you get to this level of complexion where it could not have been anything other than an intelligence in that design.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even atheists are forced to admit that. They just can't bring themselves to admit that it was a god. They'll say it's aliens.
Well, and see, he only admitted that because Ben Stein is an intellectual on his level, right? And Ben Stein could get him into a corner that way.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They're playing chess.
Yes. When
he knew he'd have to concede.
when he's dealing with someone who's not on that level, very much looking down, saying, "Look, all this stuff is very complicated. You guys won't understand it."
Yeah.
Right? It's the same argument with...
Or they'll just say it's a mystery.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
Science has yet to understand.
Yeah.
Therefore...
Yeah.
Which is by definition a religion.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But it's like... You can take this same argument, and we hear it all the time with people talking about the economy, right? And talking about how, well, we have to spend exorbitant amount of money to be able to make this whole thing work, right?
Biden's last speech of, we need to pass all these bills in order to stop inflation.
Right, exactly.
We need to spend money to make money.
You need to put $5 trillion more into the economy to stop inflation.
Yeah, and it's like, now I'm not a accountant. I'm not a math
smart
major.
Man,
but you can take the principle that I have to live by and adhere to of, I have X amount of money coming in.
Yeah.
I have X amount of money I have to pay. I have X amount of money that I can cut back on to save up and continually save money. That is a principle that is eternal. You know what I mean? And you can apply that to this, and if we did, we wouldn't be in the crap hole that we're in now, right? And it's the same thing with this stuff. It's like, look, there's some things here that I've just read. I'm not a biologist, right? But I can look at this stuff in the DNA and the information, that the technology of DNA, I can look at that and say, okay, this could not write itself.
Yeah.
They said that if they got a computer programmer to sit there and knowingly know what this stuff is, type at 40 or 50 words per minute for 50 years, it would take him 50 years, 8 hours a day of straight programming, no breaks, to be able to write out the human DNA sequence.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And that happened by itself.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And it has instructions to repair itself. All this stuff intelligently organizes
Not only
itself.
that, but the cell itself. So you can't just have the spontaneous creation of DNA. Or even if they say, well, RNA was easier, it probably was RNA. You can't have the spontaneous creation of it without the entire structure surrounding it to protect it, to help, to feed it, to assist it. It needs a complete system. So as much as we're talking DNA, and that's complicated to a level we can barely comprehend.
Right.
The initial cell would have had to have been that complex plus 10 more, 20 more factors
Yeah.
of having mitochondria, of having ribosomes,
Yep.
of having a cell wall.
All at the same time.
Exactly.
Yep.
It would the spontaneous creation of all those things. It is undersold to say it would be a vehicle spontaneously assembling itself.
Yeah.
I remember, shout out to Brother Durant. I think he moved out to Boston or something, but seminary teacher, and he's like, came up, it was a lesson. He's like, okay, here's this puzzle in pieces. He's like, I want you to drop it on the floor and have it land perfectly in place. And of course, they did it, and nothing happened. He's like, oh, I forgot. Sorry, I was supposed to say bang when I did it. But the point being that that's what you're looking for.
Yeah.
And you look at what we have here on Earth, the chances of getting all of these things. And we're just talking about the human cell here. We're not even talking about the environment that we live in to make that happen.
Yes.
It is akin to taking a 1,000-piece puzzle, dropping it on the floor, and it landing in perfect unity to be a full and complete picture, right?
A billion times more complicated.
Yeah. That's probably underselling the amount, right?
Well, and also you have the idea of evolution from one cell to everything.
Yeah.
And DNA doesn't work that way either.
Yeah.
The whole structure, you would have to entirely rebuild the DNA sequence from top to bottom to go from cow to man.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea that this process of trial and error, again, it's like computer code.
Yeah.
You enter so many errors, does the computer's code still work?
Eventually it breaks.
It's just gone.
Yeah.
You have to reinstall the program.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You have to uninstall. Like, I've been there. I've F-disked many hard drives. I'm sure Alan's been there.
Yep.
That just can't be salvaged.
No.
The worm or whatever got into it too far. It's destroyed the code. You have to start from the ground up.
Even though it grieveth you to lose that tree, right?
Yep, you cut that off with a lot of pain, but it feels so good to start clean.
That's right.
That process of evolution from one thing into super many is entirely contradicted in our fossil record of actual study of DNA. What you can find is kinds. Mm-hmm. So that's where Ken Ham was so accurate in his depiction of the kinds. You take everything of a kind of animal and you can date, in a sense, like the Human Genome Project, back to an ancestral parent. Mm-hmm. You also get into that same fossil record, and this is where Ken Ham's totally wrong, is that the Earth was created 6,000 years ago in 6 days, literally.
Right.
That's an interpretation.
Yeah. Yep, going all the way up to the members of the 12.
If you believe in Pearl of Great Price, then he straight up said there are 6 creative periods.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in those creative periods, one of them really relates to me a lot now that I've learned scientific theory from the electric universe, is the idea that our planet created next to Saturn inside of its corona, getting constant light, constant moisture, that does in a radical way explain these atmospheric changes that we find in ice cores.
Yeah.
But also he talked about how the discharges from Saturn would have been dramatic and violent, which would have explained there's at least 6 cataclysmic events in fossil record that would have wiped out life on Earth. And if you understand Earth as creative periods, not as creative 6 literal days, then, and again, this is coming from, an atheist may be like, what the heck are you guys talking about? But the differences in all the different religions, the mutual exclusivity of religions, we do claim to be the true religion, and it's mutually exclusive to all others, and we have evidence, and we'll get into that, because I could talk about this stuff for days.
I know.
Literally.
This is interesting.
But this concept of the laying down of layers of Earth could have been, one, far more rapid, and Earth could be far longer in age than the biblical description, interpretation of these strict Christians, because you have the word barao, meaning to organize. Right. So the Earth was organized. It was in that stasis of tidally locked to Saturn. As it was getting punished by that atmosphere, as well as given life by that atmosphere, there would have been these layers. And in our fossil record layers, you have things like the Cambrian explosion, where you go from almost nothing in the fossil record to 1 million species. And then they're all gone. Mm-hmm. And then you have a new fossil record start over of millions of more species that are entirely radically new and different than the last, but you see no link. As much as we in well, I shouldn't say we in the scientific community because I'm not a we. As much as the scientific community looks to the idea of that man to ape missing link, there's millions of them that are missing links in the fossil records.
Right.
Yeah.
Because of these mass extinction events, and then all of a sudden an explosion of new creatures, new fossil records. Are they similar? Are they comparable? Sure, why not? But again, you have that separation of, but there was an extinction level event, and then you get this that don't look the same, and then an extinction level event and this. You have those repeating throughout this fossil record, which attests to this idea that we as members of the church have seen in Revelation the principle of the earth being organized matter, not created from nothing.
Yeah.
Which again is another one of those, I'm arguing when I'm watching the debate between D'Souza and the other guy. Hitchens. I'm arguing with Hitchens in my head, and then I hear D'Souza talk about the Hebrews claiming there was an ex nihilo creation, and I'm like, no, they don't. The Hebrew word means organized, not from nothing.
Exactly.
Yeah. So,
Exactly.
Big Bang Theory thrown out the window. Evolution strictly from DNA, even though DNA is insanely complicated. To know that it's an extra level above that when you mess with electrical status.
Oh yeah.
Thing,
Oh yeah.
then you get a whole nother level.
Well, and
another level of random nature.
And two, what we are able to observe is so minute. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
This is. I feel like if Alma were be able to see this stuff, he'd be like, "I told you guys." He's like, "Look at all this evidence you guys got, man."
Yeah.
I had to look at a tree and be like, "Yeah, look at that. That's evidence of God." You know what I mean?
Well, in many ways, we take that for granted.
No, yeah,
because we
absolutely.
have all of this stuff. I don't know if we're gonna get there, but I mean, when Alma, close enough.
We're used interchangeably.
When Alma is talking to Korhor and he says that all things denote there is a God.
Yeah.
We take for granted the
We
stuff
do.
like wheat, flour,
Yes.
trees, oceans, the fact that we have the correct balance of oceans and land, the fact that we have as much water as we do, at the distance we are from the sun, the fact that there's a wobble to give us seasons that gives the earth rest and relaxation, between seasons, the fact that all these things, it's like, Alva's looking at us, but like, you guys don't need all this.
Exactly.
You guys are spoiled for choice. Like, you guys are overlooking some of the best stuff. And we were talking last week about the upcoming this week, and it occurs to me that God's fingerprint is all over the universe.
Oh man,
and
I'm
this
so glad
earth,
you said that.
and not because God wanted to leave his mark on it, but because we've interfaced with God to make this work. His power is evidenced everywhere, just for him being here.
It's evidenced because of systems within systems within systems within systems.
Yeah. Even things that seem chaotic, like the ocean.
Yeah.
Right. Look at a wave that crashes on the sea. It looks chaotic. Did you know that the Fibonacci sequence, that they have been able to look at a wave crashing and it obeys the Fibonacci sequence?
That makes sense. I haven't heard that, but I believe it.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I watched it and I was like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, it's everywhere, and that's
like frequency patterns.
Yes,
and
exactly.
The golden mean, right? The 1 point, I can't remember what it is. 1.6. There it is. Yep, you got it. That is evidenced in everything in nature, including our own bodies.
Yes, and that Fibonacci sequence exists in our own bodies as well. It's the
size of your bone and the end of one finger, and the next bone is 1.1 or 316 times bigger.
Yes.
And then the next bone is 1.316 times bigger than that, and that number is repeated billions of times in creation.
It basically, it just goes on, and so they took and they compared. They're like, look, we can look into a human cell and we can see this Fibonacci sequence. Mm-hmm. And atheists don't want to talk about it, and it's not taught in school.
No.
And I looked back on that and I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. I never learned about this in school.
Yeah.
because they have nothing that can account for it, right? The Fibonacci sequence.
Yeah, it's just another anomaly to them. But it's an anomaly that spreads throughout the entirety of creation.
Oh my gosh. So the sequence starts out as 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, and it goes on, right?
Yeah.
You take the last two numbers and add them together, and you get the next number.
one. Yeah.
And that goes on for basically infinity.
Yeah.
So a hurricane spirals adhere to this sequence.
Yep.
It's everywhere. Like it's
a human ear.
It's almost like ridiculous. Yeah, the human ear does. You're like, oh my gosh! And a nautilus shell, when they form,
that's one of the classic examples. Yeah.
They form with that. That doesn't just happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No.
And when you look,
it also conforms to electrical sequences.
Yeah.
Storms on the face of Jupiter and Saturn.
Isn't that cool?
I love the expansion of it. And as we get to understand the universe, I'm sure we'll find it there too. Yeah. It goes through all the things.
It's in a spiral galaxy.
Yeah, there. Yep.
Oh yeah.
It's there. It exists in the spiral galaxy, and it's like it blew my mind when I first was shown this. I was like, that's it. Yeah. This is a slam dunk. You know what I mean?
Know, right?
And when
the force of the Lord is one eternal round.
It is.
Yes.
And when you understand this, you start to like we're talking about all this stuff. We are living in and this is a funny way to put it, but it's true. We're living in a simulation. This is a simulation, right? Our spirits were not from here, right?
We're divine beings having a mortal experience.
Exactly. We're in a mortal simulation, right?
Yep.
And we, at this point in human history, I don't believe for the first time, but that's up for debate, right?
Yeah.
I think that there were other peoples before, in between us and Adam and Eve who achieved this level of technology and then were wiped out because of wickedness, right?
Yeah.
And I think that any time, and I can't back this up, but I think that maybe we are unique in the fact that we are the ones who are saying, oh, even though we can see all this stuff, we can see literal code of this simulation, right? Mm-hmm. We can see that we are adhering to something, an order, a balance. You know what I mean? But we have a huge push to say, no, there's no God.
And that's where the evidence is that well, and it happens both in religion and in atheism. The idea of predestination, right? It's this idea that because of your DNA, you have no free will or choice. Mm-hmm. What your DNA says will dictate literally every instance and circumstance. And though the world is random, apparently, it's predictable in the macro based on your DNA. Mm-hmm. Christianity does this with predestination. Neither are true.
Right.
Yeah.
Yet at the same time, God knows all things and can predict the future, right?
Yeah.
So one of the greatest evidences of anything being true is its ability to predict.
It's true.
When you have the Christian atheist debate, that's one of the greatest evidences you can put out there is, okay, what has atheism predicted? What has Christianity predicted? What has all the different religions predicted that has fulfilled as prophecy?
Yeah.
Obviously, religion has massive flaws there because 99% of the world religions are false.
And they contradict.
And they contradict each other. They're mutually exclusive. Well, so is atheism to all those religions.
They have little crumbs of truth, spattered throughout them.
And though the general agnostic will say we're looking for these things because it will prove points, they themselves don't conform to the law. Global warming as a predictive force has made like 41 apocalyptic predictions in its lifetime that have
disproved.
to this point failed to perform.
Yeah. There's a reason why they use the word climate change instead of global warming now.
Yeah.
Because it's literally, we've found that the world is cooling.
And again, we can look back into those Arctic cylinders and see that it's happened before.
Yep, a cycle.
But that evidence of, hey, you've been wrong 41 times, right 0. You have a dozen more predictions out there, sure, but at what point do you admit, okay, our models are wrong, which means we're wrong, and not just we need new models?
Right.
Religion does the same thing. Makes a lot of predictions, there's a lot of churches who have said, hey, Christ has already come back. Look, this guy is Christ. This lady is Christ. Mm-hmm. And obviously there's been a lot of flaws in the predictives in that sense. People misinterpreting the Mayan calendar and what its meaning is.
Right.
And that's even if people can understand the prophecies to begin with.
Right.
Exactly.
Yep.
But there are, I would say, perhaps nigh exclusively these accuracies in prophecies in the true religion. And I say the true religion, not just our church.
Yeah.
Because our church started as Joseph Smith was called as a prophet and on.
Yeah.
But the true religion was Christ, was Moses,
Yep.
was
Yes.
Abraham.
And it had to be restored ever since Adam to now. It had to be, like, it's a cycle. You know what I mean? And even a lot of Christian religions recognize that. It's like, why did the Messiah had to come in order to fulfill, like, the prophecies and stuff like that, but he also had to come and restore the truth because it was not existent at that time.
And guaranteed when Christ comes again, he's going to have to course correct.
Yeah.
Because we're imperfect. You know, all religions fall short of the glory of God, including ours.
Right.
I think we're closer,
Our members do.
Yeah.
Our
Yes.
religion does not.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that it's important to mention too that it's like, I think there's something to the whole teach them correct principles and let them govern themselves.
Yeah.
I think that the Lord probably, like, I know he talks to our prophet, right? Mm-hmm. There is communion there. And so like I don't think that we are apostate. I don't think it's anything like that. I think he's like, hey, here's what I want. Now do the Mahan Rai Moriankamer thing and make it happen. I'm not going to tell you how to do it.
Yeah.
Here's the goal.
Yeah. What will ye that?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
should do?
How do you think we should solve this?
Yeah.
And this goes back to the greatest evidence of Christ being so magnificent is his encouragement to look at the fruit of a thing to see if it's true.
Right.
Which is the definition of the scientific method.
Right.
Yeah.
And so as you go into the scientific method side of, well, go ahead and prove to me the theories you have true, and when they come up with error, then, okay, you can pick out which religion is true, which one's false. Which, even just of your friends and family, which one is a good person or not. Obviously, there's fruit there too. But in the atheism argument, the true, strict, not only is there no God, but we must eliminate the faith of others because they believe in a wrong thing. The fruit of that is the absolute torture and starvation of citizens in North Korea.
Yeah.
It is the murder of 60 million of their own people in China. It is the violent revolutions of both Hitler and Stalin and Venezuela and Cuba.
Yeah.
And name the civilization that has created this atheism as its core. And I'm not worried about citizens owning guns. I think we should ban governments from owning guns.
I know, right?
I think, they're the ones who are committing all the murder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the biggest flaws, I think, in any of these debates is that these accusations from atheists against Christians come up. They say, hey, look at all these religions that have done all these bad things. Religions must be horrible. Well, there's a quick and easy counter. Hey, look at this nation over here that doesn't believe in God. Are they free from these horrible things too?
Oh, man.
It's
worse.
It's a proof that the human condition is full of this error, not that there is no God. Because you go back to, and I think this is one of the most important things you can emphasize. Again, in religion, we have this general sense that God's all-powerful, all-knowing, and I'll name the third one, I forget. All loving.
Yeah. Okay.
And if he is all three of those things, why is there evil in the world? Why is there, etc.? Now, it's a pretty easy argument to say the world itself, in order to support life, has to allow for these kinds of conditions. Therefore, you can argue away, well, you can't say there's no God because there's a hurricane, because if there was no hurricanes, there'd be no life.
The hurricane obeys the Fibonacci.
But you go back to the idea of why does God allow man to do evil, right? If there was a God, why would he allow man to do evil? And there must be one thing understood, that coming from us who claim to be the true religion, we do believe God is all-loving. Yeah. We do believe God is all-knowing. We do not believe he is all-powerful, in the sense that God does not violate natural law. And only when you understand that this life is not the whole of existence can you understand that there is an eternal principle of agency, the allowing of the man to choose and the consequence outflowing. That if this life were the only reality, yeah, there's no God. This life sucks.
Mm-hmm.
When you understand that there is a pre-earth life genesis of man and his intelligence, that this life is a perpetuation based on scenarios and circumstances of your character, and then the next life you are literally a child of God, then you can begin to comprehend that the reason why he doesn't eliminate evil from the world is because in order to become like him, in order to have the power he has over all things he does have power over, you have to have manifested through your eternity of existence the same principle of the value of natural law.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Then, and only then, can you exert your force over natural law. So only when you conform to truth, 100%, can you influence the path of truth.
Yeah.
Well, and it's understanding that it takes away a lot of the mysticism from Christ's healings or from him calming the ocean and the storm and stuff like that, right? Like that, to everybody else, look, there's no differentiating between that and magic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
From doing an Expelliarmus with your wand, right?
Yep.
But when you start to see and you start to understand the things that we're talking about here, we understand that even in our DNA, that our experiences and things like that, they're discovering that these are being written into our DNA, and it alters our DNA, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why you get a kid who, like if his dad had a propensity towards lifting weights, the kid has a propensity towards lifting weights sometimes.
Yeah.
Because it's in his
One
DNA.
Of the biggest evidence of that is the trauma from the Great Depression and hoarding.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of evidence that trauma gets carried through the bloodlines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can see where, you know, in Scripture it's said that and even in our prophets and apostles have mentioned that our own spirits are recording what happened here on earth and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, it's recorded in the book of life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your DNA could be the book of life. Like we scientifically can show how this stuff is possible, that all these outlandish claims are possible, right? Or somebody who has the priesthood, right, who is acting in the name of God, why the simulation of life is respecting his authority, right? Because he's coming in, he's saying, I'm going to alter this person's messed up hand that's been deformed since birth.
Yeah.
Coming in saying, hey, I have the signature of the Creator here. You know what I mean? I'm using the power of the Creator, and I'm telling you to fix yourself, right? Oh, okay. So it fixes itself, right? It gives me goosebumps to think about.
What I love about it is that goes back in harmony. An atheist would agree with this principle. They may not agree with it in this way,
Right.
But knowledge is power. I mean, that's essentially what we're saying.
Yeah.
To actually manipulate something, you have to understand how it works in totality, right?
Yeah.
And I would think anybody would agree with that. That's how we have electricity, right?
Right.
And maybe we don't understand it fully, but we have enough of an understanding to direct the flow of that power, right? And it's the same with construction or with any sort of building technique we have.
Right.
And once again, the order that goes to the lowest up to the highest, God is just, he's that way, but with natural law. He understands it to the fullest extent in the way that he's able to use it then in that way. I think and that's another thing, is that a lot of atheists believe that science and religion are so at ends with each other. The truth is that science is just trying to catch up. It hasn't quite gotten there yet. And when it does, it will coincide.
And that understanding of that power it can and is being misused.
Yeah. And it's no fun for a lot of people, because the understanding of those things is inseparably connected with with righteousness,
right?
With living the way that God lives. He gives us these laws not because he wants to dampen our fun, because he knows it is the only way to actually achieve these kinds of understandings. That's the only way you can get that kind of light, is to follow through the same path. It is straight and narrow is the way?
Yeah.
Quite literally, for this full understanding.
Yeah.
And that's what people, they want to have their cake and eat it too, right? But it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
You have to follow along the same paths that God did in order to understand everything that he does.
And it's so funny that people, they hear that, because like we say, like Joseph Smith said, if you don't understand the nature of God, we don't understand us, right?
Yeah.
That makes God so much easier for me to believe in. It's like, look, he's not some spaghetti monster living on Mars or in Alpha Centauri, you know what I mean, whatever. It's not some mystical thing.
I'd rather believe in Cthulhu's descriptions than some of these religions.
I know. Right.
But it doesn't make it more like, and maybe I'm alone here, you know what I mean? But to me, it's like knowing that God is, number one, he is a man. And that could have gotten me burned at the stake thousands of years ago, right? But it's like, well, I guess it depends on what time frame.
Which is so ironic. Christ was calling himself the Son of Man.
The Son of
came
Man.
From Daniel, from the scriptures. Like, they used that term for God.
Yep.
It's almost like they didn't fully understand what they were saying.
Well, like Clement in Alexandria and all these guys were propagating it as a belief system after Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man of holiness is his name, right? Stuff like that. It's like we are of the same species of God, right? We are of the same species. There's some cool stuff some cool deep stuff that goes along with that, right?
Yeah.
We weren't just created in the image of God, right? We have his fingerprint on us. It's incredible. Even I would even say it's in our DNA, right? Yeah. I would say it's totally in our DNA, which is why we have the ability. We are basically God's in embryo, right? And that, like, it's so cool when you see the full picture of everything, Yeah. Scientifically, even it's plausible. It's like, if you can adhere to these gospel principles and understand these rules of life and stuff, these laws of nature. You're not going to break the laws of nature. You're going to understand them and be able to use them, right, to be able to do your thing as well. It's just so cool. It really is one eternal round. It's beautiful.
Yep.
So, any of you atheists out there, how do we do?
To all of you listening,
just the Fibonacci thing, man.
Just enough right there.
I mean, you cannot make this stuff up. When I looked at the Fibonacci stuff, I said there's no chaos in this world right now. There's no chaos. Even when a volcano erupts, it's not chaos.
Yeah, it conforms to laws.
It has to conform to a law.
Yeah.
A hurricane is the most chaotic thing that I could think of.
Yeah.
And the fact that every single hurricane that was ever been formed adheres to a Fibonacci spiral blows my mind.
Well, even the fact that we can predict hurricanes means that they conform to something.
Yes,
they have an order.
Exactly.
The fact, it's harder in some places, but we understand what is the makeup of it, even just a small degree, right? We are inching our way slowly towards Godhood, right? Well, in understanding these things.
We do understand also that the more information, the more you can predict.
Yeah.
Therefore, eventually, had you all information, you could predict all things.
Yeah. I mean, if we understood, we had enough information, we could literally tell everybody when the hurricanes are going to be, what they're going to do. Yeah. You could predict it to a T. God is doing that. He's just farther along the path of understanding than we are.
And it's not a matter of predestination that he makes the choice for us. No. That it is simply his ability to comprehend all things that allows him to place a prophecy of this is going to happen 2,000 years down the road, 6,000 years down the road, that he can make a prophecy and have it fulfilled.
Yeah. I mean, if we're playing chess, God can think a million moves ahead.
Well, and
essentially.
68 trillion.
I think there's something to be said about the fact that he has been through this as well. He has been through his own mortal experience, his own mortal simulation, right?
Yeah.
And when you take that, like, have you ever played a game that has a jump scare in it and you make one of your kids play it or your buddy or something like that?
I remember you jump scaring me with your bicep.
Yes.
So yes, Alan. It's a fond memory.
That is a fond memory. I went shooting shotguns and I had raspberries all over my shoulder and bicep. And I was like, Curtis, look at this. And he looks at it and I go, rah, rah.
Yeah, he's like, touch it. I went to touch it, and it's right before I reach his arm. Rah! Anyway,
It was a cheap laugh.
yep. So I've experienced a jump scare.
But so I did that with a buddy of mine. I had played a video game through this one level, and it had some wicked jump scares in it, right?
Okay.
Now, I don't know what path he's going to take or anything like that, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how he's going to achieve, how he's going to weave in and out of it, because he's not going to do it the exact same way that I did in that level.
Guaranteed. Yeah.
Right? But I know that he will achieve that jump scare because of how the level is set up. I know that he's going to get there eventually somehow, regardless of how he gets there, right?
Yeah.
And so I can sit there and I can look back and I can either warn him like a good person would, or I can say nothing and I can allow it to happen, which is the path I chose, right?
Yeah.
And he freaked out. Totally, I think, dropped the controller and stuff like that, right? But you know, taking that stupid little circumstance, that really is,
It's a little snippet of understanding.
it's a very small, overly simplified version of what God is like, right?
Yeah.
He's been through this before. He knows that if we make certain decisions, there's going to be a certain outcome where he's like, look, you guys, if everybody during the time of Noah repents, I can do something here for you guys and nobody will die, right?
Yeah.
That was a possibility because he saw what was going to happen. He knows what's going down.
The choices before you.
Yes, exactly. You know, but obviously that didn't happen. Eight people maybe in that instance, you know.
Yeah.
But it's cool to see that we start to understand, and there's no mysticism to this. This is very cool stuff.
Yeah.
Well, and science is, as to yet, unable to explain consciousness.
Yeah.
It is supremely higher a level of a state than what they can study from simple activity of the brain. All right, so it's one of those mysteries of science that we need to find out, that you cannot explain away through strictly currently studyable means how consciousness exists, how pre-consciousness exists. I myself can witness to the ability to precognition, just through some, and I won't get into it but anyways, some experiences I've had.
Spidey sense.
But they're
Neil gland.
Yes.
one of the biggest things that we have to look at is evidence, right? And science is obsessed with the evidence of measurable, peer-reviewable, etc.
Mm-hmm.
However, when it doesn't conform, they cast aside. There is a severe amount of evidence of post-life experience where people die on an operating table or something like that.
Yeah.
They have some kind of experience, come back, and it's documented that they know more than they could possibly know had they actually died, ceased to exist, been brought back to life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That is just one of the minor evidences, and it is a minor evidence compared to all that exists.
Yeah.
That we know there is something more to us than strictly our observable creation. The same thing is true with the nature of the body. Science, as we are being forced to conform to, is very pharmaceutical right now.
Yeah.
And there are dozens of other techniques of medicine that are being cast aside as dross, rather than trying to inculcate that into the medical community, like acupuncture, like electrotherapy,
Right.
like there's so many other therapies, but our nation is obsessed with psychotherapy and drugs, and that's basically the only things that are peer reviewable in America.
Yeah.
And so I think in general, and this is like we do with so many of these other podcasts, if all we've done is open your mind to the possibility that there is more truth out there that you've yet to discover,
that there is one of these principles that if you could just look into because it caught your attention and maybe it opens your mind to the idea that there's more to know. There's more to learn than simply what you're being taught by a particular side, a causality side, a tribe of this religious landscape. Then we've been successful.
Yeah.
That sounded like a closing argument. Was
You
that
know
your
what?
closing argument?
Might as well be.
I think I can go next then. I really enjoyed thinking about this topic all week and studying about this topic. As we know, Christ is the center of the gospel, right? But the Father is at the heart of Christ. So this is the linchpin of the linchpins, talking about God and the Father. And it was, we had a really good experience this last Sunday for Family Home Evening. We do ours on Sunday. And starting a little while back, we get done with the Family Home Evening lesson, and I would ask the kids if they have any questions, right? Just any questions about the lesson, and then sometimes just about, gospel in general. But it was interesting this last week how they were in a place where they were hungry. It was so much fun to feed them spiritually, and we were talking about the nature of God and Heavenly Father, and how we know who Heavenly Father is because we know who Christ is. The fact that they are distinct, different beings, but and they have their own personalities. But Christ Himself said, "You see me, you know what the Father is like."
Yeah.
And at the heart of this really is we're reminding people to come to know who Heavenly Father really is, who the Father is. And oftentimes the word God has lost some of its tender feeling and some of its heart, the love to it.
Yeah.
And that's the reason I think a lot of people have turned to atheism, because they've lost the love in the term God, right? And it's one of the most misused words that's ever been, here on the planet, because it's been ascribed to so many different things at this point through our human history. But that's why I love that Christ constantly referred to him as the Father. He had a literal reason, but he was also doing it for us,
right,
to understand who he is. And as we draw closer to God, we draw closer to Christ, we draw closer to truth, which has been a big point on this podcast today. But all of those things revolve around happiness and joy. And as, we take the chance on these things, we take a leap from the lion's head in faith, we receive that back to us every time. And so, like I said, we're going to find people who are adamantly angry about us, and they're angry at religion. Mm-hmm. They don't want to consider these things. So just meet them on their level, do what you can, but testimony of the truth, is where we end up. And I'll say that in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. And don't forget to walk as children of light.
I really like what you said there, and it reminds me of that, what manner of men ought you to be, mm-hmm. right? Even as I and my Father in heaven, right? We're supposed to be like them. He was telling us right there, you need to be like us eventually, not right now, because you can't, right?
It's not possible for you.
And I think that I want to take and apply that to not just us, but to, I know that we have some listeners who are on the fence, who may not even necessarily are not believers anymore.
Yeah. And
I want you guys to take what we've said and just take a chance and get down on your knees and pray about it.
Yeah.
Right? Just it's not going to take anything away from you. It's not going to hurt anything, right? Yeah. There's, it's one of those things. Put your full heart in. Yeah, but put your full heart in. Don't do it if you're not going to be not
sincere.
Not sincere and putting your whole 100% into it. But I think that there's even some people who feel, and I have family members like this who feel like they're not worthy, like they're too far gone and stuff like that. And it's like, look, in this computer game simulation of life that we've laid out, every one of us is in different levels, and that's fine. That's how it's supposed to be.
Not everyone can handle the red pill.
Not everybody can handle the red pill.
Yep. There wouldn't be different levels if we didn't need the different levels.
Exactly. And so if you feel like the old, 1980-something Mario, right, where you're the smallest version of Mario that you are, right? There is potential within you, and no matter where you're at, there's potential within you, and God will use that
Go eat a mushroom.
to get you to that mushroom. To get you to that hidden mushroom.
We're nerds.
I know we're nerds. We're nerds. Hopefully this applies to
Disclaimer,
somebody.
We are not encouraging you to eat
Yeah, do
actual
not eat actual mushrooms.
Please YouTube the old
Video
1980s
game
video
reference.
game reference. Okay.
The spirit's gone. I'm sorry.
I know, it's all right. But it's true. It's like if you feel like you are nothing, if you feel like you are so far gone that he wants nothing, that is Satan speaking to your heart, and he doesn't want you to understand this stuff, and he wants you to be miserable just like him. And if this is true, which I have a hard time, you would have to, like, I don't even know there's a way to convince me that this isn't true.
Yeah.
Especially like looking into this stuff, spending a whole week looking at the evidence, looking at DNA, looking at the galaxy and how everything adheres to something. There's order, there's intelligence behind it.
Yeah.
You know, pray about it, see what kind of answer that you get, and don't let that freak you out. When you do get an answer, because I 100% believe that you will, and I know you will, if you do so correctly, right? If you do so with a sincere heart, with real intent, having faith, right? If you do that, what are you going to do with that information? What are you going to do about it? Don't let that freak you out, right? Because it's gonna require a little bit of responsibility on your end. It's gonna put some things on your shoulders. But don't let that freak you out. Do something about it. Start off small. You know what I mean? Show up to a sacrament meeting. Whatever you feel and the Spirit directs you to do it. And I say that in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
You know,
Amen.
I'll say one more thing.
Yeah.
Since I didn't, finish with my testimony.
You're good.
As much as we tried to address this idea of atheism as a debate, if you want to put it that way,
Mm-hmm.
This was not a debate scenario. This is just as much a podcast for the atheist as it is for the believer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is just as much us reaching out because no matter who you are who are listening, you are not our opposition. You are not opposed to us, and we are not opposed to you. At the same time, those who would attack truth, we recognize that for what it is. We will not cower from our positions. That's a lot of what I see in debates is attacks and accusations that aren't just meant to be in the debate. It's meant to make it so that the viewer feels afraid to discuss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those gotcha moments.
Yeah. Exactly.
The debate scenario, the debate setting, I don't have a lot of respect for because of the nature of there's no spirit of persuasion and love between the two.
No.
So as you both, believer and not, as you want to develop relationships with those around you and show them love and be open to their ideas and opinions and express yours in love and compassion, stand for what you believe, know what you believe, research what you believe, and be open to the disproving of what you believe. Because God loves questions just as much. God wants you to ask. If He is there, He would sincerely hope you would ask and not leave it up to someone else told me. Of all the religions of the world, we may be unique in this, that we tell you God will communicate with you if you just simply conform yourself and are willing to conform yourself to truth. And I say that in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.